Good evening, and I want to welcome everybody. Happy June to our Monday, June 5th meeting. Council, I'd like to go ahead and call the order of our meeting with the invocation of the pledge led by Councilman Weaver.
Let us start.
Mr. Van Meter, please call the roll.
Angelou.
Here.
Bowers.
Here.
McGregor.
Here.
Padova.
Here.
Renner.
Here.
Schnetzer. Here. Weaver.
Here.
Wonderful, thank you. Item B, additions or corrections to our agenda. Do we have any additions or corrections? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to item C, hearing of visitors. I believe we have a resolution presentation by council.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much. This evening, honored to present a resolution recognizing June 1st through 7th, 2023 as National CPR and AED Awareness Week. Honored to be joined this evening in chambers by Mr. Rick Roll and his son Rob. Mr. Roll was the victim of what's known as the Widowmaker several months ago, and thanks to the fast response of those in the vicinity, as well as AEDs and first responders, is with us this evening, and just highlights the the importance of getting trained in CPR, first aid, and AED use. We actually have a clip that 10 TV, from a story 10 TV did about Mr. Roll, and I'd like to share that with everyone this evening.
Spring into action. Exactly 2 months ago today, a basketball official suffered cardiac arrest on the court. Staff and fans at Columbus Academy sprang into action, saving his life.
Today, Robert Roll returned to thank the people who helped him, and 10 TV's Lindsay Mills was there.
It was a 7th grade girls basketball game at Columbus Academy. The game going into overtime, seconds mattered.
I could have been driving home that night.
But not on the clock.
There'd been no one to save me there.
Richard Roll, a game official, went down.
The only people who could have saved me, the people that were here.
School staff and parents in the stands acted fast.
I thank God for that, and thank God for everyone here.
The stakes were high, and a team of strangers saved his life.
I never thought I had a heart attack because I thought it would hurt more.
He had suffered cardiac arrest. Now, 2 months later, Richard returned to the school to thank those who had his life in their hands.
To think that, I got up from that. I just thought I'd passed out and I'd get up and finish the game.
The Mifflin Township Fire Department provided challenge coins to give to every person who played a role. The challenge ahead to spread the message of CPR education and how vital it is. Every coin followed by an embrace.
Keep it up.
Richard wrapped his arms around the people who stepped up on the sidelines, preventing his family from suffering the greatest loss.
You don't know what you have till you lose it. And obviously that night for 2 minutes or whatever, I lost everything. But now I have everything back.
Lindsay Mills.
I'm very thankful.
10 TV News.
Well, for now, Richard Roll says he's not sure if he'll return to his duties as a referee. However, he is motivated to get healthy enough to return to the golf course by summer.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, for playing that. At this time, before we present the resolution, I'd like to invite Mr. Roll to say a few words. I can share, thanks to Director Vollmer, who did some quick research for us. We do have 21 AEDs in city facilities, and we're currently working on getting those AEDs in our police vehicles as well. But Mr. Roll. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Mr. Roll, if you could go to the microphone at the lectern, please.
Trenton, thank you for inviting me tonight. I've known Trenton, seems like for 20 years. His parents are the salt of the earth and very good people, and I'm glad he's on city council. So thank you for inviting me. I've had my open heart surgery 20 weeks ago today, and I was refereeing that basketball game that night. I'd never had any heart problems. I'd been to my doctor the end of November, full physical, everything was fine. And that night, I felt fine until I didn't. And then I went down. I was clinically dead for 3 minutes. The chest compressions and the AED saved my life. Thank God I was at Columbus Academy. There was 2 doctors there they were playing Bexley, so 2 doctors from Bexley, 2 doctors from Columbus Academy, and probably 6 lawyers. So somebody was going to be happy. So luckily the doctors won out this time and not the attorneys. So I had open heart surgery on Martin Luther King Day, and everything has been going great since then. But the AED is so important, and I think Columbus Academy has like 14 on campus, so it's good that Gahanna has this many and trying to give them the police cars, because you just never know. There's a House Bill, I think 47 in the Ohio House, trying to get where all sporting activities would have an AED on site. Because when I was down there testifying on that bill, it's amazing how many parents were down there saying that their kids were playing soccer on a field or something else, and they went down and they didn't recover, they died. So that amazed me that there's that many kids in Ohio. I've been refereeing for 35 years. I've never seen anybody go down. I've never seen a kid, so thank God for that. And I got to meet the Columbus Academy girls one that week you saw on the video. Then a couple weeks later, I met the Bexley girls. So you could imagine 7th grade girls seeing a referee die on the court. So, but it was nice to go back and show them that everything worked out okay, and they were running around like it was nothing. So I appreciate everything, and hopefully the police cruisers will get the AEDs, and that this doesn't happen to anybody you know. So I'm thankful. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Roll, and colleagues, if you'll... If my colleagues would like to join me in front of the dais, we can grab a photo with Mr. Roll and his family.
Where's the vase? Should have had the vase with you.
Count on them to pick the right ones. Just make sure the contract says why.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Absolutely.
Thanks to my colleagues.
All right, next up, we have a proclamation presentation by the mayor.
If it's on or not, but Kevin, actually, who told me I didn't need a microphone? Ray told me I didn't need a microphone. Well, the reason for the proclamation tonight, and I know council has several other resolutions as well, is we have National Police Week, we have National Engineers Week, we have National Public Service Week, we have Women in Engineering Day. What we never seem to have is National Government Finance Week or National Government Finance People Day. And yet that seems to me to be a little bit strange, because the work of our finance department is so critical to ensuring that we are being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars that are entrusted to us. We have an exceptional finance team here at the city, led by Director Joanne Burry. We have all the members of the finance team with us: Cynthia Lampkins, Chris Wright, am I missing any? Corey Weibensinger, as well, who was a part of the finance team, is now the senior deputy director as well. We were just notified in May that for the 9th consecutive year, we received the GFOA, which is the, where is it on here? Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada. Their Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting Award. Again, it's the 9th consecutive year that we've received that. That award was issued for our comprehensive annual report for the fiscal year that ended December 31st of 2021. Joanne and her team are busy working on the report for 2022, which will be filed May 31st, I believe, is the deadline for that. So you're 10, Joanne, you're 10. But the work that they do, again, being recognized 9 years in a row by GFOA for that, but also for the 10th consecutive year receiving the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Those are the highest attainment that you can achieve in recognition for government financing. Government management, fiscal reporting, presenting the budget materials and our finances in a way that motivates our residents and our stakeholders to actually read it, and present it in a way that's understandable for them. So I wanted to issue this proclamation in honor of our most recent, our nine-year winning streak here, to Director Burry and her team for the work that they do on behalf of the city of Gahanna and their financial reporting. And it's just a proclamation to honor and recognize their exemplary work in governmental budgeting, fiscal management, and fiscal reporting. So Joanne and team, please. Yes. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the work that you do. Really, congratulations, and thank you for being such great representatives of the city. You get that. All right. Chris? Oh, come over on this side, Chris. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, speaker slips. I have 2 of them. And when per our council rules, when I call your name, please come to the lectern and state your name and address for the record. Miss Kathy McCorkle?
Good evening. Kathy McCorkle, 677 Piccadilly Court, Gahanna. We can't hear you. Can you hear me now?
A little better, just push it up.
Is this on?
Yeah, there you go. You just might need to get a little closer to it.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
All right. Kathy McCorkle, 677 Piccadilly Court, Gahanna. I'm here asking for and expecting a no vote on Resolution 0018, marking June as Pride Month in Gahanna. And I just want to say that last summer, when I spoke to this topic, one councilwoman walked out as I was speaking. So if you choose to do that tonight, be my guest. In the June 14, 2021 Committee of the Whole minutes, when Councilwoman Bowers was explaining the first ever Prideful resolution, she said that the resolution is important to her. Why is it important to her? Because she is a part of the LGB plus groups. The LGB plus agenda is to normalize sin and make everyone accept it. The LGB plus agenda is to change American culture from moral to immoral and to accept indecency as normal behavior. The LGB plus agenda includes using our children and indoctrinating them into this perverse lifestyle. This is child abuse. Any excuse you give for a yes vote is unacceptable. Any yes vote tells these groups, I will help you pervert Gahanna's culture. Any yes vote is a vote for abuse and indoctrination of Gahanna's children. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Ms. Sharon Montgomery.
I'm Sharon Montgomery, 572 Bonington Way in Gahanna. Before I make my comments about the proposed sign code changes, I'd like to publicly thank Chief Spence for being so prompt in putting copies of this fact sheet about the new distracted driving law in the counter at the police building. I'm speaking at hearing of visitors instead of the public hearing because of my comments are not about the same sign code changes that are proposed in Ordinance 40. I'd like to point out something that probably hasn't occurred to many others about the sign code near the streets, about the signs near the street, naming the tenants of the retail strip. It occurs to me because of my focus on distracted driving. I remember reading minutes of the now defunct Design Review Board in which members discussed applications for multi-tenant signs. They preferred that the various tenants of this use the same or at least similar colors and also the same or similar fonts. As I recall at that time, it was a preference, not a requirement. Aesthetically, that seemed justified, but that worried me then for the same reason that it worries me now that it appears to be a requirement in 116511 Part 5A. When you consider the fact that drivers are bombarded with traffic and commercial signs and with a variety of road users all demanding their attention, from a safety standpoint, this is not justified. If tenants are each allowed to use their own color, font, logo, etc., of their own businesses, drivers looking for a specific business can find them much more easily, thus removing one kind of distraction. One example that comes to mind is our Gahanna Residents in Need on Granville Street. Their panel on the tenant sign does use their distinctive letter shapes, but on a maroon background instead of their own green background. Think about when you're driving in one of 3 or 4 lanes full of vehicles. Which pulls your attention away from traffic more? Reading a list of several store names that all look alike, or spotting Target's distinctive red circles and dot? Another argument in favor of easing the requirement in 5A is that we aren't even consistently applying it. Some of the signs at Stone Ridge Plaza use some of the tenants' own colors. Thank you for hearing about multi-tenant signs from a different perspective.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Clerk, that is all the speaker slips I have. Are there any additional?
No additional.
Okay, thank you. All right, item D, public hearing. We do have a public hearing tonight. I'm going to read the rules. I just want you to know that this public hearing is for some zoning code changes, and this is coming back to committee next week. But by our own rules, we do have to hold a public hearing.
Mr. President, the clerk is shaking his head over there.
These zoning code changes will be voted on tonight. Some are on consent, some are on regular, but the rezoning,
Sorry.
that's the one that's scheduled to come back to committee next week.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, pursuant to Council Rules 9.10 and 9.11, the President of the Council shall give a brief statement or explanation of the item under the hearing. Prior to the opening of the public hearing, the administration may make a presentation of slides, videos, photos, staff comments, or a combination thereof regarding the application in question. The public hearing shall be opened with any proponents being allowed 7 minutes, opponents 10 minutes, and then 3 minutes for rebuttal by the proponents. Such time schedule shall prevail unless extended by the president without opposition by a council member. Everyone addressing council will approach the lectern and state their names and addresses for the record. Would the administration like to actually add anything to tonight's public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. President. Michael Blackford, Director of Planning. The Chapter 11 changes we discussed on April 25th and May 8th. Staff did not have additional information to present on those changes tonight. We do have a follow-up related to Chapter 13, but that comes on a little bit later in the agenda. I would like to address the comments here real quickly that were just brought up about signage, and I would just like to clarify a few things, and that is Staff and our code, we do not dictate colors or fonts or logos. Multi-tenant shopping centers like Stone Ridge, that is the landlord decides what to allow. So as far as colors and fonts and that, they sign off on that. Staff in my 9+ years working here, there has never one time, again, because it's not in code, have we ever made any comments about colors or fonts. So understand the concerns in that. I just want to let you know that current code and the changes, we do not change those requirements. And again, that's not something that staff reviews for. It's really size and placement and number of signs. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, starting the public hearing, looking for proponents. And I think I do have a slip. For one, Mr. Doug Irvin.
Good evening. Whoa. Voice is too loud, and that is, okay, here we go. Hi, Doug Irvin, 1183 Riva Ridge Boulevard, Gahanna. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I've been a resident of Gahanna for 30 years and have been in the real estate development business for over 40. And the one thing that I do know is that stuff changes, and much has changed since I first started doing this. I'm encouraged by all of these changes to the zoning code. In my dealings with Michael Blackford and his staff, they've always been very helpful and professional, but some of these things we just keep banging our heads against just because it seems to be more normal and customary than at a time when this code was originally written and adopted. So for once, I wanted to come and say positive things about the zoning code as opposed to what I want you to change in my favor. And hopefully this help streamline the process for many applicants, staff, and council and planning commission as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, are there any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Okay, last call for anybody else that wants to speak on this. All right, public hearing is closed. Thank you, everybody. All right, Part E, consent agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt our consent agenda as published?
So moved.
Have a first by Ms. Bowers.
Second.
Have it second by Ms. Padova. Any discussion?
Can I ask a question? On number 4, ordinance 0044, it says waiving second reading, but isn't this second reading? Is that okay just to leave it like that?
Well, technically, it was tabled at the, I can't remember which meeting it was. At the last council meeting, it came back to committee. So I think the point is that it's an emergency.
Yeah, I know that. I just didn't know if it was okay that it said waiver second when this actually is the second.
I guess I'd defer to the city attorney.
I guess it was read the first time, so that was the first reading. That reading was tabled, so it was not, and then brought back. So since it's being brought back, I would say that this is probably the first reading still, because we're bringing it back, so.
So should we now be
Waiver
saying that
then.
we want to waive it because that the whole
As written.
point was to get it,
But it's-
not 30 days later than.
Right, it is written that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that,
So it should stay the same.
just to make sure that we're doing it
Yeah.
the correct way.
I think it was a good question.
It was okay.
Made me think. Yes. Quit doing that.
All right, any other discussion about our consent agenda? Okay, Jeremy, please call the roll.
Bowers,
Yes.
Padova,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Schnetzer, Weaver,
Yes.
Angelou.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, consent agenda is passed. Item F, ordinances for introduction and first reading. There are no, we're not taking action on these, but I will read these into the record. Ordinance 45, 2023, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Gahanna adopted by ordinance 198-96 on November 19, 1996, and subsequently amended, changing the zoning district of plus minus 16.666 acres located at Hamilton Road, parcel ID 025-013767 from LMFRD and SCPD to LMFRD. Did I already get that? Crescent Woods Apartments, Griffin Caldwell applicant. Ordinance 46, 2023, an ordinance to amend Ordinance 81, 2021, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Fishback for Phase 1 of the Creekside Flood Impact Mitigation Project to include Phase 2 professional services. Ordinance 47-2023, an ordinance authorizing supplemental appropriations, capital maintenance fund for Creekside flood mitigation and plaza improvements professional services. Ordinance 48, 2023, an ordinance to accept a general warranty deed from Paul Michael Walsh and Stacy Lynn Johnson for 0.158 acres of right-of-way dedication along a parcel located at 698 East Johnstown Road. Item G, ordinances for second reading and adoption. We do have three. The first one, ordinance 27, 2023, an ordinance to amend the City of Gahanna Code Part 11, Planning and Zoning, Chapter 1106, subdivision without plat, allowing applications to be approved administratively. Do I have a first for this ordinance?
So moved.
Have a first by Mr. Weaver. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Snetzer. Any discussion? Okay, Jeremy, please call the roll.
Weaver,
Yes.
Schnetzer,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Padova,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Angelou,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Okay, that ordinance 27 passes. Ordinance 41-2023, an ordinance to amend the City of Gahanna Code Part 11, Planning and Zoning, Chapter Section 1169.05, conditional use approval, extending permit validity time frame from 1 year to 2 years. Is there a first to adopt said ordinance?
So moved.
Got a first by Mr. Weaver. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Snetzer. Any discussion? Okay, Jeremy, please call the roll.
Weaver,
Yes.
Schnetzer,
Yes.
Padova,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Angelou,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
McGregor.
Yes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, one more. Ordinance 42-2023, an ordinance to repeal the City of Gahanna Code, Part 13, Building Code, Chapter 1311, Registration, removing requirements of certain contractors to register with the city. Do I have a first to, do I have a first to adopt said ordinance?
So moved.
Have a first by Mr. Weaver. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Snetzer. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Weaver.
I believe Director Blackford had a few comments he wanted to make on this one, and then I got a few comments and follow-up.
Excellent. Mr. Blackford.
Thank you all very much. I know at our last discussion, which was May 8th, there was a follow-up for staff. It was involving the liability insurance. Just bear with me one moment. I'll just very quickly share. Fortunately, it's a very quick and easy modification to our permitting. So on the screen right now, this is an example. So the May 8th conversation was if we're going to eliminate the contractor registration concerns about removing liability insurance and perhaps adding that to the permitting process. Very simple change here. This is an example of one of our permits, and this is almost word for word the language that's on our contractor registration. So the liability insurance would still be a requirement for the same folks, for the same types of projects. it would be required with the building permit rather than a separate application and process. And the effect of that change for our external customers is that rather than having a separate application and process, again, they would be really, it's just a couple of clicks to upload that as part of their permit application. And the result of that is that there's a lot less touch points with the city in order to issue a permit and begin work. What we find oftentimes is that a permit's ready to be issued, but the contractor registration hasn't been completed. Therefore, we can't issue that permit. So like a lot of times, these organizations have multiple folks doing multiple duties in that, and so there's a lot of confusion on that external applicant's point there where they're ready to begin work and they cannot because that contractor registration hasn't been completed. So it's very confusing to have a permit that's ready to be issued, but we can't because of a separate process. By requiring it with the permit, again, it's just a couple of clicks, a couple of uploads, and it's much easier to begin construction in a timely fashion. So again, this really helps the external customer reduce some of their touch points with the city. I know there was a question about whether or not the state requires liability insurance, and I can confirm that the ORC section 4740.06 B4 does require liability insurance. So the state requires that as well as the city in this case. Be happy to answer any questions, and I apologize if that was a little confusing and rambling.
Mr. Weaver, did you want to continue?
Can we do questions first? And
Sure. Are there any questions? Ms. McGirt?
Sure. Just, I noticed that this is for commercial multifamily. Has the residential permit also been updated?
We would do so if the registration is passed, this amendment. So it would be 30 days to be effective. We'd have to go through all our various permits. We just took our frequent flyer and just kind of mocked it up real quick.
Okay, but they would be,
Yeah.
so we're not passing an ordinance that would require you to do that. It's
Correct.
basically like on good faith that the administration's
Oh,
going to.
absolutely. We will do that on all of our applications, yes. And as we go and move more and more to digital, it'll be even easier to have that requirement and easier to get it uploaded and everything. But yes, absolutely. This is just one example, but it'll be on all of our permits.
And
including
where did those,
residential.
I apologize if I missed this, where did those policy limits come from?
The code, it's up to the chief building official determines what those dollar amounts are. The state has separate requirements. Those are not enumerated in the ORC. But yes, the state has requirements. It's up to the chief of building official. I did do some research because I don't know much about this, and this dollar amount was fairly common. I found a few examples in the state of Ohio that had the same amount. But again, that's chief building official.
Would you consider varying that between commercial projects versus residential projects, or is that the same number that you would use across the board?
I'd defer to Chief Building Official Ken Fultz on that. It's a great question.
It would be much easier if we kept that same figure for all application forms.
Is that best practices, though?
I mean, we've always used that same number for our contractor registration. We could make it higher, but we felt that was always adequate. We haven't increased it lately, but if you felt we should increase that number.
It's not my area. I would say, though, that in various insurance fields, especially for commercial projects, that feels a bit low. But I don't know. I would look to you for that research.
Yeah, most people submit their liability insurance to us generally just to $1 million. And we're just trying to keep this at a nominal amount so it doesn't discriminate against anyone, a small contractor.
I would just add that in my research, this was on the lower end. So if we wanted it greater, Again, the code does read it's up to the chief building official, but it might be time, and it's very easy to make that amendment since it's not enumerated in code. So if there's any specific feedback that you'd like, we can certainly look into that and make those changes accordingly.
I think I'm interested in maybe what that state guidance is, and I understand that it's not necessarily codified, but if there is administrative state guidance on those numbers, I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, we can follow up. And the good thing is, like I said, this is much easier to pivot and amend since it's not baked into a code currently or in the future. So we can definitely follow up with that research.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Blackford.
absolutely.
Ms. McGregor?
Based on Marissa's comments, would it make a difference depending on the value of the permit, what they were doing? I mean, if it's a permit for something that's only a few $1,000s, this seems way adequate. But I mean, if it's something for $1 million, then maybe this isn't. So, I mean, but it seems like, for small jobs, it seemed like it would be adequate for some. Anyway, but that's not my question. If somebody was, just an example like Grin, or like a volunteer organization, they're having volunteers do some work, how does that affect, like having because my husband's done jobs for people that maybe he should have had a permit, but he didn't have the liability insurance because he's doing it for a volunteer.
So under the current code and how this would be applied if the registration, again, if the code change is enacted, would be, and I know Ken and Mike, has had conversations, and the only exemption is for homeowners. So if there was a will to have other exemptions, that's something we can discuss. We discussed that, I think it was back in April.
Okay.
But currently and in the future, there would be a requirement to have a registered contractor for those nonprofits. But that's something that I know we've discussed, and, again, external customers have kind of sought relief a little bit from that, but we don't have that ability to grant any relief.
Because sometimes they might be volunteering their time, so they wouldn't have necessarily liability insurance to volunteer, whereas they have it at work. They're covered at work, but they wouldn't, they're qualified to do it, but they might not have the, does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? And maybe this isn't the discussion for this at this time. I was just curious.
Oh, I'm sorry, one moment.
Well, it's a matter of, you're saying, would this be a requirement for everyone on all permits, even if it's a nonprofit? It's a matter of, is this voluntary to provide that liability insurance, or are we going to make that mandatory? If we make it mandatory, it would not exclude anybody.
It's mandatory, so yeah, there's no solution.
So even nonprofits would have to provide liability insurance on their application forms.
Okay.
Which again is currently how it's a requirement now. Yeah.
Okay.
So there wouldn't be any change to who and when the requirement would be.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank Director Blackford and Mr. Foltz for all of their hard work and research on this. I think for me, and I know Director Blackford got a couple last-minute phone calls from me. So I'm hesitant to support this ordinance and repeal the registration requirement, even though we would be including that in the permit application itself. It seems like we're attempting to get that information on the back end rather than prospectively if we had the registration up front. If I, as John Doe, am looking for a contractor, I would think I'd want that information up front versus getting hiring a contractor, finding the permit, and then going through that process. I think just based on some of the questions I'm hearing, that I'd rather see some iteration of this come back in a new proposal with the fully fleshed out proposal of what it might look like moving forward. But at this time, I won't be supporting the resolution, or the ordinance, excuse me.
Any other discussion?
I guess, let me, if I could, Mr.
Please, Ms.
President.
Bowers.
I think to piggyback on that, and maybe I'll ask Mr. Blackford, Director Blackford, if he would have any thoughts about this. I have reservations as well. I think we sort of tried to work through them. You know, my concern is more on the reactive sort of side. What happens if there is a problem, and how do we help the homeowners identify remedies or other property owners? And so that's why I thought that perhaps this sort of permit insurance process would cover that. Is there an urgency for this, or would there be a potential for us to hold this until we identify Ms. McGregor's, maybe some carve-outs for commercial building owners potentially, or if it's a nonprofit commercial building owner, and maybe flesh out that conversation a bit more, and then also make sure that we've got the policy limit information in front of us. Would the department be receptive to that, or do you feel there's a need for us to move forward with voting on this now? I should say passing this now.
I would say that the more variables you have, the more it's going to be a challenge for the external customer. Understand some of those concerns, but again, we don't get involved when it's a homeowner and contractor. City doesn't play a role in that. But the external customers typically struggle with a lot of variables, and having those different amounts for different projects, it makes a lot of sense to me, but I think they only have one policy from what I can tell in the research I've done. So they have a dollar amount, and they're not changing it.
Right.
And that I would say that we've been, communicating with contractors. This is something that they're, eager for, but I don't know, how it would necessarily impact the permits that we have in. But I would say a one-size-fits-all approach is probably the best approach for internal and external customers, because the more variation, that means the more conversations, the more touch points. That's where the delays and the confusion and the frustration from that external customer's standpoint comes from. Obviously, it's up to you all, and we definitely at least appreciate your consideration on the request, but understand the concerns.
Can I ask a
Oh,
question?
Ms. McGregor.
If the limits you have for this liability, it doesn't mean they couldn't have a higher policy. I mean, it doesn't mean that the client couldn't require a higher liability to do their job. It's just that you're saying this is the basic one required to get a permit.
Correct, the minimum that we require.
But the client
Yes.
could require a higher one based on the value of the project.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Mr. Beckford, I think what you've done, oh, Ms. Badova, please. I'm sorry.
No problem. So currently with the registration, you said that is, they can register online, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So if a contractor was not registered right now and they were going to do a job for a commercial business, they would go online, register, and would they be able to also apply for the permit at the same time, or do they have to get the registration and then come back and
Great questions. They could apply for the contractor registration online. They could submit for a permit, whether online or in person. Ultimately, we could not issue the permit, which is what authorizes construction, until that contractor registration was completed.
So are they able to fill out both of those forms at the same time?
Correct, yes, yes, they can. Yes.
So if they have to register, it's not necessarily, they have to fill out an additional form, but it's not necessarily taking more time in their process. Is that correct?
It is an additional form. It appears that, again, I think a lot of these folks, there's different folks in their offices that do have different responsibilities and tasks. So oftentimes, the folks that are applying for the permits might be more of the folks that are in there doing construction. And then it's people back in the office who are doing some of the registration. So a lot of times there's confusion with those team members of that external team as to, who's doing what. That's not our fault, but it sort of ends up being our problem as we try to shepherd people through the permitting process. So that's where a lot of the frustration delays, and we get a lot of the, we got a crew, they're ready to go, we can't do this, and some of those things. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. Not always on the external team, but in theory, you're absolutely right.
Do you have any idea or what the percentage of permits are getting, not necessarily denied, but getting kicked back because they're not registered and having to hold things up? If that's a lot or if it happens very...
It's, ever since this was brought to my attention by the building team and being located in close proximity to that front counter, my ears started to be dialed into that. And it is literally a daily occurrence that there's multiple calls. In fact, I think if Kevin's here, our front desk for Dina Williams, she's on the phone more than any other person in the city. Oftentimes it is with contractor registration. So it is a daily occurrence. That's fine. That's what we're here for, is to help folks through that process. So that's what we're here to do. But again, there's a lot of sort of frustration on the external customers because they're ready to go and they don't quite understand. And it's like, well, you didn't fill out this correctly. We need more information, and that delays the projects.
That's all for me.
Thank you. So what I was saying is that I think what you've done is actually a creative addition, and I think it satiates the question that we had about the residential side. But I do share with Councilwoman Bowers that I don't think we've had it really tight enough with the commercial side. We did hear from Ms. McGregor that maybe it should be tied to the contract value. That's exactly what we do at the county. It is whatever the contract value is. To the question of other smaller firms, small businesses, especially MBE, WBE, women-owned, minority-owned, and all that kind of stuff, the data clearly shows that those are actually subs to a general. They very rarely are the general, and they can actually fall underneath the shelter of the general's liability. So I would actually urge that we look at and have a different level of numbers for commercial. And it could be the contract price.
I will say that in my research, and again, it wasn't exhaustive, but I did see, I want to say City of Columbus and some other folks had a higher number than we did. And that's very easy to change. I'd be more than happy. I think we have some zoning code discussion. I'd be more than happy to have a follow-up at an upcoming meeting and present the findings of that more exhaustive research of what those dollar amounts are, and very easy to change the applications.
Ms. Bowers?
Yeah, I think, thank you to that point, and thank you, Mr. President. Do you anticipate bringing additional zoning code changes to us, and what is the timeline for that?
So Chapter 13 is building code and not zoning code. So it's a different code section for this particular change.
Okay, is there additional zoning? I understand this is building code. Are there zoning code changes that are going to be coming in front of us?
Nothing planned right now.
Well, we have the zoning code rewrite that is going on, which is
Yeah.
part of a broader
Again,
project. And we anticipate that the workshops will be coming, Michael, with Planning Commission and Council
Correct.
next month, I believe.
Yes. But again, that's
So no
Different.
no proposed code changes coming soon because the workshops have to come first. So the workshops will be coming next month.
But we anticipate Chapter 11 code changes coming in the future,
Correct,
later this year?
correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and just so we're clear, these Chapter 13 code changes were mixed in with Chapter 11 code changes?
Yep, Chapter
Okay.
9, yep.
Okay, so is it possible then that we table this until we come back later this year? If there's an appetite for that?
I'm definitely open to that.
All right.
I'd like to actually hear and get the feedback about what we actually are going to do to amend permits for the commercial side. Again, I think you've creatively, solved a good piece of the problem. Now, if we can just address the other side, I think I would definitely be better open to that.
So I'll move to table ordinance 42, 2023 to, let's see, we could put it on the agenda perhaps for July and then table it to a later date if needed to go out later. So I would move to table it to July 10th just to try to run it concurrent with the additional code changes that might come.
Okay. Jeremy, you want to make a comment?
Is that okay?
Well, I guess just for public notice,
Sorry,
so
excuse me,
July,
not July 10th, I apologize. July 17th would be a regular meeting.
No.
but we're actually, I think council is proposing to move the July meetings back a week. So I was just going to state for public notice and awareness that council would meet for the first time July 10th.
Okay. Okay.
So that would be a regular council meeting.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
So,
If I could, I don't know if we might just want to table it until after we have the workshops on the zoning code and then bring that together at that point.
Our council rules require a date certain, so that's why I was proposing a date certain.
Is there a time limit on that?
no, we can actually change it if July 10th doesn't work
I was going to say,
out.
if I remember correctly, with the proposed schedule change for council, we would have committee of the whole discussions the 17th and the 31st.
That is
I would
correct.
move it as late as possible unless there's a time limit under your council rules.
So you're suggesting, okay, so instead of the 10th, you're saying that we,
August 7th?
yeah, right, August 7th.
Okay, so I will strike my motion and move to table ordinance 42-2023 to the regular meeting scheduled for August 7th, 2023, with an opportunity for discussion at committee in between, or workshop.
So there's a first to table 42, ordinance 42, 2023 to August 7th. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Weaver. Any discussion on this proposed tabling?
Can I ask a question? The questions of the limits are just administrative. They can change the limits up or down. This is just doing away with the registration. So if you're okay with putting it on the applicant for the permit, you can, Director Blackford, if I remember, said he can change the limits. We could have a discussion on the limits, but this is just doing away.
That's exactly right. And thank you for that question. In my mind, I just wanted to get this settled before I actually take action on this and vote on this. But I'll leave it open to my other colleagues.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. I think for me, I would be interested in seeing some of those other questions answered and that have been posed, as I think that would help me support the ordinance as a whole. And I know there's other opportunities coming. Director, I'm sure I'll give you another Monday afternoon phone call at some point. So I do appreciate your time and research on this. But just given the ongoing questions, I do support the tabling.
Okay. Any other discussion on the tabling? Okay, Jeremy, please call the roll.
Bowers?
Yes?
Weaver?
Yes.
Angelou? McGregor?
No.
Padova?
Yes.
Renner?
Yes.
Schnetzer?
Okay, ordinance 4223 is now moved to August 7th. Thank you. All right, item H, correspondence and actions. Mr. Clerk, do you have anything for us?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you. Council colleagues, does anybody have anything for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none. Item I, representatives, Community Improvement Corporation. I did not attend the May meeting, and I know my colleague, Mr. Weaver, did. Do you have a short report for us?
Very short this evening, Mr. President. Thank you very much. The CIC met on Tuesday, the 16th at 8 a.m. The mayor informed us that Shay Hess has been engaged to assist with various development projects in the city. We were also introduced to Jen Hackman, who's joining the city's development team. Looking forward to working with her. The next meeting, and I do want to remind colleagues, for the CIC is slated for Tuesday, June 20th at 7:30 a.m. at the Golf Course Clubhouse, and that's the first of 2 annual meetings that all of colleagues are invited to join if you're able. And I think that's it for the update for me.
Yeah,
Mr.
that's the
President.
first of for 2023. And
Yes.
we did do it twice last year. But yes, thank you. Okay, item 2, Mid-Ohio Regional Planning, MORPC. Ms. Angelou.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Executive Board met June 1st, and obviously that's a smaller thing than is going to be this next Thursday, which is our regular commission meeting. I want to just go over a couple things. Number one, we've done a little bit of work with Money Mondays, which is a really interesting thing. So if you look on the information that Jeremy has put together, that is part of that. I also wanted to let you know that on June 7th, which is a Wednesday, MORPC night at the Clippers. And the Hilliard City Manager, MORPC Secretary Michelle Crandall, will throw out the first pitch. I did that first pitch when I was actually the secretary as well. And it's really a wonderful thing. So if anybody's interested in going to that, it's a purchase tickets at the place that, and the Tansky area tickets are about $10, I think. So if you're interested in going to that, it would be something good. Now, the other thing that I wanted to bring up was that we have Enriching Lives at Today's Modern Library at the Gahanna Branch Library. And I've told everybody at MORPC that our executive board that they hopefully will come and see our amazing modern library. And that's from 8 o'clock to 9 a.m. on June 15th. That's a Thursday. We're all invited there. And it's for breakfast. And let's see. I had one more here, I thought, but maybe not. We also had, wait a minute, just let me find it. To have the June 7th one. Okay, that's all. We have 51 interns, too, this year. This is the most we've ever had. I remember when we had 4 or 5. So now we have 51. And how many do we have, Mayor? We have 2?
I believe 2.
2? I didn't know if it was 2 or 3. Okay, 2. So that's really
3.
good.
It's 3.
Okay, I thought it was 3. And they're so good, these people that want to be part of this, and it's a wonderful opportunity. So with that, I will say that's it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Weaver, I think you have an update for your item.
I do. Thank you, Mr. President. The Regional Policy Roundtable met on May 16th. We received a State House update from Minority Leader Russo. Of course, all eyes are focused on the state budget process right now, which must be passed by June 30th per the Constitution. It's my understanding that the Senate version is to be introduced imminently, expected tomorrow, actually. In the House bill, some items of interest. The Brownville remediation fund and demolition funds were put back in the House version after being removed from the governor's budget. The homestead exemption, which helps seniors and disabled veterans with their property taxes, would be indexed to inflation. There's some progress on the local government fund restoration, but not to the original percentages. Also some changes on the income tax brackets. Of course, all eyes are on the Senate proposal, what might be coming from that chamber, including the possible elimination of income tax altogether. Some other items from the budget, Fair School Funding Plan was introduced as part of the House budget, as well as an increase in General Revenue Fund investment in child care. On the Senate side, Leader Russo indicated that Senators Coonsey and Hackett are considering advocating changes to the exceptions in the distracted driving law. And I also wanted to flag HB 64, House Bill 64, which would modify the eminent domain law. Basically make it much harder for cities to exercise the rights of eminent domain, including raising the standard of proof from a preponderance of the evidence standard to clear and convincing standard. MORPC opposes the bill as drafted. I will, my colleague Ms. Angelou touched on Money Mondays, but we did hear from Dr. Todd Bradley, who is responsible for the Drive investment update. And so Money Mondays, they're 30-minute segments from 1 to 1:30, excuse me. And these are opportunities for entities to learn about various grant funding opportunities. And the next meeting of the Regional Policy Roundtable is August 15th at 1:30. Thank you, Mr. President.
Can I add to that? I think there's about 50,000 grants that are standing out there. So it's really an interesting situation.
All right, thank you. Convention and Visitors Bureau, Ms. Padova.
Thank you. Midweek at the Creek starts this week at Creekside. It will run every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. This summer, with the exception of next week in preparation for CBJF. This week's band is Whiskey Business. The Gahanna Farmers Market will also take place on Wednesday from 4 to 7 inside the Gahanna Sanctuary and also in the public parking lot across from the sanctuary. Creekside Blues and Jazz Festival begins on June 16th. So this is the last meeting that I will be announcing CBJF volunteers, but we are still in need of volunteers, including nonprofit groups for admissions gates and beverage booths. So individual volunteers can sign up on creeksidebluesandjazz.com, and groups can contact Lori Kappas or Teresa Emsch, the volunteer coordinator. And that's all for me.
I have a question. Do you have any of the things that I can take to MORPC to hand out to people to come to the Jazz Festival?
I believe there are some by the door on your way out. If there aren't enough, then I'm sure that Visit Gahanna has them if you want to stop by and
I
grab
just
some.
wanted to make sure that they had it because that's the other thing that I was telling them at the board was that they need to come to that because it's really good. So, thank you.
Thank you. School Board, Ms. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. The City and School Quarterly meeting was held on May 17th, which feels like a lifetime ago now. Two primary matters were discussed at that quarterly meeting. We engaged in a discussion. One is engaging in a discussion of mutual financial frameworks in order to inform and ensure a foundation for ongoing compensation plan negotiations. And the second item was student parking. The logistics for the financial framework discussion are still being worked out, but I am confident that both the administration for the school district and the administration for the city understand that this is a priority and needs to be advanced in order to bring about a resolution to the compensation agreements renegotiation. This has been a long-standing, uncompleted item over several years, and I know that we are all working hard to try to bring this to a conclusion. I understand that a June date did not work for the city administration due to other pending projects with finance. So I expect that we will work towards setting a July date for that dialogue and look forward to cooperating with our colleagues at the school district in order to determine that date. The concept behind this dialogue is that council members and school board members are going to be asked to take action on a proposed agreement that financially impacts both the district and the city. The dialogue seeks to give members of each entity an understanding of the underpinnings of the financial realities for each entity. The second issue that we discussed is parking, which many of us have heard about. It's also being diligently worked on by the school district, and unfortunately, it's proving to not be as straightforward as we would all like it to be. The district has been making policy changes that will go into effect for next school year. They've been exploring options for off-site parking, including with private lot owners. And there is a proposed use of Shull Park parking lot during the school day that is being worked out with the administration as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Item J, official reports. Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And yes, we are continuing to work with the schools to try to assist them and facilitate what we can in terms of helping them to solve projected parking issues for next year. I think they're going to lose another 80 spaces next year as that construction project continues to evolve. So Shull Park is an option that we are evaluating. I know we're working very closely with the city attorney's office to understand any legalities associated with that in terms of ingress and egress. Obviously want to making sure that the students are as safe as possible. So we will continue to try to assist them and work with the schools as much as we can to make sure that the impact to all of our residents is as minimal as possible. Speaking of the schools, I congratulate the members of the class of 2023 who graduated over Memorial Day weekend from Gahanna Lincoln High School, and also the graduates from Columbus Academy here in Gahanna as they had their graduation today. So we are one community and we're proud of the accomplishments of all of our graduates, and I'm sure that they will accomplish a great deal in their years to come. Congratulations as well, the Gahanna Community Chorus, and to their director, Kate Cremine. They put on a wonderful show yesterday afternoon at Gahanna Lincoln High School. It was a show of jazz tunes. June is the month for blues and jazz here in Gahanna, and the chorus got us off to a great start with just some fantastic renditions of beloved jazz tunes, and just sitting there listening to them reminded me of growing up, and my mom always had the radio on, and a lot of those tunes were on the radio back then, so it brought back a lot of good memories. And we need them to perform at the Blues and Jazz Fest next year. I thought that set would be great on the community stage, so to talk to Kate about that. May 17th does feel like a lifetime ago, but that was a day I was honored to participate as a panel member at the Columbus Metropolitan Club. The discussion topic was regional mayors preparing for Intel. I was very, very proud to be part of a panel with Mayor Sloan Spalding from New Albany and Mayor Barnard from Johnstown. We discussed ways that each of our communities are dealing with the economic growth that we are seeing around us, that we are anticipating that we will be having to deal with as the Intel project continues to grow and evolve, as well as the challenges that we are projecting and how we are going to work collaboratively to try to address those and things that we are doing individually as communities. That event was live streamed and it is available on the Metropolitan Club's YouTube page if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. And we are inviting Mayor Spalding to a meeting coming soon in terms of the Northeast Regional Collaboration. If you watch that meeting, you'll know what I'm talking about. Along those lines, we are continuing our momentum of economic growth here in the city. Over the last few weeks, we celebrated several ribbon cuttings and business recognitions. We welcomed the opening of Creative Options, which is a new company that provides support and services for individuals with disabilities. We celebrated the official ribbon cutting for the new Lola and Giuseppe's Bakery. Joined in recognizing Ribbon Technology Corporations. You might know them as RibTech, that big funky looking building, which is really cool inside, that sits over on Taylor Station Road. They belatedly celebrated their 50th anniversary in business. They actually would have celebrated that, but it was during COVID, so it was actually their 52nd anniversary. But they are a worldwide business that's based right here in Gahanna and just continuing to grow. Donato's recently, I think within the last week, celebrated their 60th anniversary of the opening of their very first shop. And we have a 140,000 square foot warehouse along Taylor Road that is still under construction in our industrial zone, but is already fully leased for 10 years. It will be a business bringing about 60 plus manufacturing jobs, good high quality jobs, family sustaining jobs to our community. And we look forward to being able to offer a little bit more details on that project in the coming weeks. I think these business highlight what we've come to experience over the past several years, that businesses are choosing to grow in Gahanna. And I'm confident we will continue to effectively compete with our other municipalities, our peer communities, for quality businesses and quality jobs, not only in the next months, but in the years to come. Now that school is out, our camps and summer programs are underway. Both pools are open. They open Memorial Day weekend. Not a moment too soon, in time for the 90-degree temperatures. Our staff, our seasonal staff is all in place and doing a great job thus far. And our community, we do have new pool rules that went into effect. If you remember the incidents that we had in the fall last year, those pool rules carried over. And our community, I'm very grateful to them for understanding the reason behind those and for their patience as we work through that. I appreciate the reference to summer events kicking off this week with Midweek at the Creek and the Farmers Market this coming Wednesday. I should also note Creekside Live returns this coming Friday. There's a full schedule on Gahanna.gov of all the musicians, not only Friday, but coming up as well, and you can check those out there. CBJF is coming up, Creekside Blues and Jazz Fest. In the past, we've always staffed into Mission Gate on Friday night, kind of a combination of administrative staff and council. If you're interested in doing that, it is the biggest event of the year, and it's a great opportunity and an easy way to show support for that event. So let me know, send me an email or stop me after the council meeting. Let me know if you're interested in helping out, and we'll get you signed up for a shift on that. Finally, as you know, just a month ago, we announced that our Economic Development Director, Nate Strum, would be leaving us to pursue a new career path outside of the public sector. He had accepted a position with a private development company. Tonight, I'm pleased to share with you that we have hired a new Director of Economic Development. His name is Shannon Hamans. He will be joining our team later in July. He has nearly 30 years. He will be bringing nearly 30 years of economic development experience with him, 21 years plus in the public sector and 8 years in the private development sector as well. I think having both that public and private sector experience will give him a unique perspective that will be extremely beneficial to us and to our city. We've had historic economic growth, and we don't expect that to slow down anytime soon. So we have many projects in the pipeline, and I believe that he will help us to continue to effectively compete for quality jobs that are set Gahanna out for long-term and sustainable success. As Councilman Weaver mentioned earlier, Jen Hackman recently joined our team as the Economic Development Administrator. And once Shannon joins our team in July, we will be fully staffed again in development. Jen herself brings many years of economic development experience in her role. She was previously the Director of Economic Development out in Pullman, Washington. Had done some previous work in the Cincinnati area, so she's excited to be back in Ohio. And she's already done a great job of getting to interact with our small businesses. She has a strong small business background and also in workforce development, so we're going to get her focused on that. To that point, our economic development event, I think I mentioned, was June 8th. We had to realign that date due to conflict with the facility that we're going to be using. That new date is July 11th. So please put that on your calendars as well. July 11th will be our economic development event. That will be at a private business. So that will be an invitation event focused on workforce development. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing to add.
Thank you. All right, item K, council comment. Ms. Angelou.
I have no comments.
I'm sorry?
I have no comments.
Oh, okay, thank you. Ms. McGregor.
Thank you. In 2005, we welcomed our first two granddaughters, and this year they both graduated at the Schottenstein Center. So that was fun to go and see two of them graduate at once. One's headed to OSU and one to Miami, which was actually my alma mater. The other thing, the mayor brought up Grody Industries, and I'll just tell a quick story. When my dad was in college, he went to school with Jim Grody's older brother, and they were talking different things about what they were doing. And Jim was quite a bit younger than my dad and his older brother. And the brother said to my dad, my younger brother, Jim, he thinks he's going to make a living making pizza. I just don't know what he's thinking, you know? And so anyway, that was the beginning of, that was the opinion of the older brother. So anyway, apparently he was quite successful in his making pizza. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. I have circulated my constituent report for the month of April, and I ask that that be appended to the minutes. In April, there were a lot of great things that I was able to attend. One of those things was presenting to a Veterans B School class on the importance of local ordinances and zoning when it comes to being knowledgeable, or at least aware of those things if you are backyard beekeeping. And then I was also able to attend the Workers' Memorial Day luncheon at the IAFF 67 Union Hall in honor of and memorial of workers who were killed, injured, or made sick on the job. That's an annual event to recognize the sacrifices of our workers. I have a constituent hour coming up next Tuesday, the 13th, at 5 o'clock at Friendship Park. I'm glad to be having summer weather where we can return outside for constituent hours. I would also like to take a minute to thank the Gahanna Veterans Memorial volunteers, particularly Becky and Tom Nealand, Malcolm Glasgow from the VFW, and others for their meaningful tribute last Monday, to remember the lives lost in U.S. Armed Services and to keep in mind the impact of those losses on their families and loved ones. OB Stillwell did a great job stepping in a pinch to deliver an address and called on us to continue to make space for diverse voices and perspectives and to engage in civil dialogue, because that, the way he framed it, is that is the freedom, it is that freedom that is part of the promise of American freedom that gives meaning to the sacrifices of our armed service members. So that ties into something that I wanted to reflect on briefly tonight. We've heard it a couple of times recently to think about the kind of community that we want to live in. And part of the kind of community that I want to live in is an expressive community, a place where residents can live authentically in their truth and to be safe doing so. And in a community where we can be exposed to that expression and celebrate it, whether it's something that we identify with or not. And by creating a community where expression is protected, supported, and valued, we help create a holistically safe and healthy community. So as we celebrate LGBTQ Pride Month and recognize National Gun Safety Violence Awareness Day and Weekend, and recognize AED and CPR and Emergency Medical Services Week, which happened at the end of May, I am looking for common threads of how we support the health and safety of our queer community, of our other vulnerable communities, of our first responder communities, and all the various communities that make up Gahanna. And part of that is leaning into and embracing critical civil dialogue that OB Stillwell spoke about last Monday. So I will conclude my remarks tonight with urging dialogue and expression as a way to make Gahanna even stronger and even better, and that I look forward to being part of that here internally, as well as with community partners like our schools and our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vidova.
The only thing I have is that I did forget to mention that if you volunteer for CBJF, you do get free admission to the festival that day. So pass that along to your friends as well, Councilwoman Angela, if they want to volunteer. But if you volunteer, you do get free admission, and there's also a volunteers picnic that will happen, I believe, after the festival down the road a little bit.
Thank you. Mr. Snetzer.
Thank you, sir. Nothing to add this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, thanks to everybody for joining us this evening. I want to echo the congratulations that were made to the class of 2023. My own graduation year of 2007 is starting to get really far behind, and thinking maybe I need to pursue another degree so I can move that graduation date a little closer to the present. Also want to echo the thanks to all the volunteers who made the ceremony over Memorial Day at Veterans Memorial Park really lovely and impactful and meaningful. Thanks again to the Roll family for being here this evening. I mean, if that doesn't highlight that seconds count, I don't know what will. So I would encourage folks to get trained. I know my day job offers training as well. I know the city partners with Mifflin Township. I believe Director Volmar indicated that all of our Parks and Rec staff are trained in CPR and AED usage as well. So encourage all those who are able to get trained. Really enjoyed the Gahanna Community Chorus yesterday afternoon. It was a lovely afternoon of jazz, if you will. I'm sorry for the pun. It was on their program, though, so I'm just stealing it. But it was a really wonderful performance. The Gahanna Farmers Market returns this week, Wednesdays from 4 to 7 at the Gahanna Sanctuary and the adjacent parking lot. That'll be every Wednesday through September. The big news is that they are now taking SNAP and WIC, as well as other nutrition incentive programs this year for the first time. You can find out more at makegahannayours.com, and I just want to say thank you to all the volunteers who make our farmers market possible and such an enjoyable event each week. Lastly, on the resolutions this evening, we are very fortunate to live in such a vibrant and diverse city. These resolutions are one of the many roles of a legislative body to highlight the diverse members of our community, their successes, the progress that's being made, as well as the work to be done, especially for those who have been historically marginalized. I believe that acceptance matters and that acknowledgement and support matters. I believe that Gahanna is an accepting community and a welcoming community, one that lifts others up, as I indicated in my invocation earlier, and I believe that our resolutions today do just that. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I have no additional comments tonight. Asking for a move to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.